Do 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 do.
Cast Iron Brains, a podcast that came to an important conclusion today. When presented with a novel and seemingly complex event happening in the world, one option is to read as much about it as you can get your hands on, trying to figure out all the different ways people are interpreting the event, combining the insights of 20 or more different analysts and academics and politicians and commentators into something that approaches a complete picture of the situation in an attempt to simply understand the basics of what happened and how events like this one might be avoided in the future. You could spend a few hours sincerely trying to understand something and come away not really all that certain that you really know any more than you did at the start, but at least you gave it the old college try. But what this podcast concluded today is that if you did all of that in good faith effort to just know a little bit more than you did before, you are an incredible sucker, because there is a much simpler alternative. You could just say, for example, go woke, go broke, in the process blaming the collapse of the nation's 16th largest bank on some diversity trainings and a few tweets by someone you've decided is the VP of equity at some bank, but like the dumb and bad kind of equity rather than the money and banking kind of equity. And you will have effectively communicated all you need to communicate to the vast majority of your audience, who will think you are awesome and persuasive and hilarious and will want to make you the President of the United States, because you didn't make them feel bad about not knowing the immensely complicated obscurities that undergird reality, and instead told them how awesome they are for already knowing everything they needed to know, without having to raise so much as an eyebrow. My name is Bob, sitting across the way from my good friend and co-host. At least I think that's him. He's in a strange t-shirt tonight. That's Abe. How you doing tonight, Abe?
Doing well, Bob.
Yeah, here we are. Lori's here, too. How you doing, Lori? Lori's in.
Daylight savings. I'm sick, I think, because it's daylight savings.
Tonight is Monday, March 13th, 2023. It's a Monday. It is, in fact, the first full day of the new time regime, and we are all suffering its ill effects, at least here in Virginia. Abe, I don't know how the time change has affected you down there near the equator.
So it hasn't, but, I work from home. I have a pretty easy going thing. So, they say whenever they make these changes, there's always like an uptick in road accidents. I wonder if some people didn't make it home because of our gimmick.
It's really stupid.
That some.
We talk about this literally.
We talk about it every year
twice a year
because it continues to be a problem. We keep talking about your bullshit problems that won't go away. This is one that could actually be fixed really easily.
Wasn't there more momentum for this a year or two ago? It seems like
no, there was momentum to keep it on this time, which is wrong.
Right, but that's we one of the times we spoke about this. I think we determined they did this back in the 70s and that didn't work, right? So why would they go back to the thing that we already have history?
Because they're short-sighted morning people, extrovert assholes. That's why.
There's more. I read another couple of pieces because, of course, it's just a news cycle churn thing where every 4 or 6 months you get the same stories about the stupid time change.
Right.
And so today I was reading another story about how it's actually your brain and your stupid body prefers to wake up with the sun, and it does better things for your entire situation there. Whatever. It takes a certain kind of, to use a gross word, certain privilege to be able to wake up with the sun and then allow your natural circadian rhythms.
That doesn't sound like privilege to me. That sounds like torture.
Yeah. But the point of the article was that we should not go to permanent daylight savings time because it is, for whatever reason, it's better for your body to have that early morning sun at the time that you wake up, rather than being forced to wake up in the dead of night.
That. There's a really good, the Washington Post did a really good, they do those little interactive, like as you scroll along, it changes.
Yeah, those are nice.
They did a really good one about how, like, in winter, we're supposed to go to bed early and sleep in. It's on purpose. Like, we're supposed to do that. So by switching it later in winter, it'd be more fucked up than it was 2 days ago.
Yeah. Well, whatever. There's nothing we can do about it. The stupid Congress passed it out of the Senate last year, and then it never got a vote in the House. And apparently there's more momentum. That's the thing that I read today. There's more momentum for it again this year to get it out of the House,
okay, so maybe
out of the Senate, and then maybe the House will actually do it. No word yet on what Biden would do if presented with this particular bill.
You think would rise to the level where he would veto it? Like, why would he care? Just like, whatever. I'll sign whatever.
I don't know.
If he cares about our well-being and they want to keep it at this bullshit time, he would veto it. Or he would do better, and he would do the thing where you just don't sign it. What's that called?
The pocket veto?
Yeah. Yes, because he would be too out of sorts to remember to sign it.
Not because of his diminishing mental capacity, but just because of...
No, because of his diminished mental capacity due to the time change.
Right.
Right. Although I can't imagine that the fault lines here are political, right? It seemed like you would get enough... Because, I mean, the last time it was pushed, it was Rubio, was it? Like, from Florida?
Yeah, it was Rubio, yeah.
Yeah, there isn't a one side versus the other kind of thing. It seems like a preference thing or lifestyle thing. The people that do stuff in the morning, like...
It's good versus evil. Those are the lines.
Anyway, I know that's boring because we talk about it every 2 or 3 times a year now. Abe, did you watch the Oscars last night?
I did.
Big night in Hollywood?
Yeah, I did. Usually I will watch it the day after, but I was like, I'm not doing anything now. And it was on, and so I watched it.
So we had the good fortune of starting it 20 minutes late. Like, we recorded it so we could, catch it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And we wanted to watch The Last of Us last night as well. So we didn't want to have to choose. We wanted to do both things. And the good news is about something like an Oscars telecast is that it is extremely overstuffed with commercials and also bullshit that I don't need to watch.
To be fair to things, the stuff that's the bullshit, like we skipped a lot of it. That stuff's fun when we're not on a time crunch.
Sure.
It would have been fine.
I almost never want to watch any of the musical performances at the Oscars. Like, I just don't care.
The montages, those are fun.
Sure.
We skipped all those due to time constraints.
We skipped a couple. Anyway, the point is we started 20 minutes late, and we had caught up by the time 9 o'clock rolled around. So then we just paused that and jumped over to The Last of Us. We watched that for 45 minutes. And so now we're 45 minutes behind. And by like 11 o'clock, we had caught up again.
You caught up before they get to the...
Yeah.
Yeah, caught up before the end. It was great.
Yeah, so this is skipping through commercials and what, just like the...
Skipping through commercials and skipping through, like, I don't need to see Lady Gaga for 5 minutes.
You
I don't
missed
need to
the
see...
Indian dancing?
No.
We watched that.
No,
one.
Bob was distracted. He missed the best part of the whole night.
That was pretty neat. I've never heard of that song before.
It was so fucking good.
The RRR movie?
Yeah, not too.
Yes.
I threw that on late one night going to sleep and watched like an hour of it.
It's not the same on a stage. The stage made it perfect.
I mean, I disagree.
Silence.
It was
Did
way.
you see that mic drop?
It was way cooler in the movie when they had all of the cool visual effects going and making it look far more dramatic. But whatever. It looked like a fun movie. It's also like 3 hours long. All the goddamn movies are too long.
That's not an
As
outlier.
I discovered this in this past week when I binged through a bunch of the Best Picture
Bob worked
nominees.
very hard this week.
So what was your impression of the Oscars overall, Abe? A good professional production?
Yeah, I thought it was a nice, straightforward, not a noteworthy kind of thing. No one's like assaulting anyone. There's no like snafu with the winners at the end. It was just beginning, middle, end. I listened to the music, the Lady Gaga, the Rihanna second appearance. Boy, she's doing a lot. Pregnant. Look at her.
Also didn't need to watch Rihanna perform. We skipped that as well. And that was fine.
And then the Indian songs. And I also like whenever they do a little, throughout the show, they do the best picture. Here's a snippet.
Right.
Yeah,
big fan of
those are
movies. Let's talk about the movies. And the Everything Everywhere like almost sweep was like surprising. I was reading this article a couple days ago or just recently. And somebody was saying that there's no chance this movie is too weird.
I said that.
Are you referring to my blog, Abe? Is that what you're doing here?
It was
So
Bob.
I want to talk about that movie, and we can do that now,
By the
I
way,
guess.
now.
you are
and
right.
Then we
It
could
is
let's just do
very
the
weird.
show where like the interesting part is now, and then I could maybe go to bed because I don't feel good.
Yeah, I don't feel great either. It's going to be, like I said, short show.
You
And
didn't say that.
I did. I'm going to move quick here. All right, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like I said, I ended up catching all 8 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees by the time we got to 8 o'clock on Sunday night. I posted a quick last-second Oscars preview blog.
Bogus rankings for any Avatar fans. This is a terrible list. Number 10.
Number 10.
Losing out to movies that Bob has not watched.
I
This
dare
is
you to quibble
ridiculous.
with anything that I said in my quick capsule review of Avatar 2, The Way
Literally,
of Water.
hey, I haven't seen these 2 movies, but I know they're better than Avatar, so they're...
We already talked about Avatar at some length. We don't have to go into that again. But yeah, if I were... I ranked the movies by my proprietary formula determining the filmic achievement and greatness, which I did not deign to explain. And then I made my list there. So 10 was Avatar, 9 was The Fabelmans, Top Gun, Maverick was in there at number 8, which
That wasn't number 1.
No, it's the one that I wanted to win, but I also knew there was no chance in hell that it possibly could.
Okay.
Also, as a film snob at heart, which I truly am, I cannot rate that incredibly stupid movie any higher than I did in my list, even though I acknowledged that I fucking loved it and
Right.
thought it was awesome.
It was the best movie of the year.
Best Picture.
Yeah, and as I said, if there were any justice in this world, this stupid and awesome movie would win Best Picture. But the Academy is bullshit, and awards are given on the basis of what the Academy believes the giving of the award says about the Academy.
Sounds like you're on the Academy.
Or what people will think about the Academy. What they don't understand is that no one actually cares about the Academy at all, besides those pompous assholes themselves, and they should just give the award to Maverick, and Tom Cruise should fucking bust through the roof of the Dolby Theater and accept the award on a bungee cord before being yoinked on out of there by a passing 747, which, by the way, is basically how Jimmy Kimmel entered the theater that night, which was funny that was, I posted it, and then that's like exactly what happened.
Right. On that point, somebody mentioned it. I didn't notice it while watching the Oscars, but they said there was like, in absence of your celebrities, like there weren't that many of them. It seemed like a lot of people just didn't show, Tom Cruise included. It's not clear if the Jimmy Kimmel people knew ahead of time that he was going to show, but it seemed like he would
Tom
make some
Cruise.
jokes.
I don't remember Tom Cruise usually making these events.
But if he has, first of all, he had a very popular movie. It wasn't going to win Best Picture, but like downstream, the sound or some other thing, to support your people.
Well, give the guy a fucking nod. If you want him to show up at the Academy Awards, nominate him for a movie. And first of all, he should have won for Magnolia. He was fantastic. He should have won this. I don't even remember who won the Supporting Actor Award for 1999, but he should have won for that performance. He was spectacular in it. But whatever. Just nominate the guy. I know he doesn't do Oscar bait kind of movies, but first of all, he's never been in a poorly written movie in a very long time anyway. He picks projects that are I'm not saying that they're very well written, but they're never poorly written.
Not
right?
too many clunkers.
Yeah. Right. He operates at a bare minimum of a B+ in terms of just the people that he's able to surround himself with and the sorts of movies that he's able to produce. It doesn't mean that they're great achievements in filmic greatness or whatever my stupid thing was, but they're perfectly adequate. And compared to a lot of the other shit that gets awarded, why not? Just throw him a bone, and then you get the most famous guy in the world to show up to your goddamn award show if it's important to you.
Right.
Anyway, moving on from Maverick, which should have won but didn't. It won I think it won the Sound Award.
Yeah, it did, and it should have.
And as the Sound Awardees are walking up to to the stage to accept and give their speech or what have you, the voiceover lady is like, they went to different airplane places and just recorded the sound of jet engines. It's like, well, way to ruin the magic, lady. Like, so what you're saying is they didn't actually do anything of consequence here. They just went and recorded some jets making loud noises and then played them at the right moment.
It was like all night. The stupid lady was like, they went to college and studied things, which no one cares about. But that was particularly demeaning. Like,
Right.
Look at the achievement in sound. They just recorded it.
By the way, on that point, when this voiceover person is doing the spiel as they're walking up to the podium, I think it was Michelle Yeoh who won Best Actress.
Yeah.
And
that was a good one.
an unnecessary comment where, like, despite what it looks like, she's got no martial arts
She's
experience.
like,
It's like,
she has no formal martial arts
Here's
training
this-
whatsoever.
Here's this actress
and I had
who
just gotten
isn't
done-
actually good at the thing
Right.
she's pretending to be
Right.
good at.
I had just gotten
She's
done watching this
acting.
movie,
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right, actually. Like, she didn't appear to be some sort of judo master watching her perform these acts as a 60-year-old woman on
Right.
film. Like, yeah, whatever.
and I wonder, is that like do you think that the participants have any input in the blurb, or is that just like their whole thing? We're going to,
No, I'm sure that they have, that there's the writers of the program and the various PR people probably work together to put those sorts of things
Okay.
together. All right, moving on to a movie that I had not yet seen, but did in fact watch this week. Women Talking, which is a movie based on a novel which was inspired by true events. And
We talked about it.
we
Abe
talked about it when Abe
already.
saw it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of one of these like very cloistered religious communities.
I can tell you, it was very easy. Like when we were watching it and I was doing my schoolwork,
Yeah.
I was not tempted to watch this movie. I was like, this is perfect if I want to pay attention to something completely not this.
This is about like Amish type, the Mennonites,
Yeah.
and the men have been using some sort of cattle knocker outer, like something that they use on the cows to make them go to sleep. They've been using that on the women in order to have their way with them.
And not just one, like many of these dudes are doing this
It's
scam.
you might even call it. They have like a system in place, some sort of systemic
Yes,
anti-woman thing going on here.
something like that.
And eventually they get found out. And all of the men are, in the context of the story at the moment, they have a handful of them have been arrested, and all of the rest of them have gone into town to help expedite the process of bailing them out. And in the meantime, the women get together in the barn and have a vote and then a lengthy conversation about what they are going to do with themselves as a response to the men being revealed to be doing this thing. And it comes down to either stay and fight or leave are the
Right.
two options that they come back with. So like stay and fight and change the way that our system operates here, or take off before the men get back.
Wasn't there a third? I mean, it's been a couple months since I watched it. Wasn't there like a third one where just like accept it, like just stay?
Right. The third one was just
because
forgive, but
God-
nobody
'cause
voted for that one.
this
Right,
system
so-
that these dudes have in place, according to God, you got to forgive them, or else no heaven for the women who have been harmed.
Right. Those women lose out in the first round of voting. There's
Yes.
it's not a first past the post system,
Yeah.
so they eliminate that poorly received option and then move on to conversation. And the first big set piece, and my main sort of criticism of the movie as a work of art, is that first major set piece with the women presenting their different opinions on what should happen plays very much as like a dialogue in a feminist philosophy course between two competing sets of ideas, more than it actually plays as a honest conversation between actual characters who might represent something like real human beings.
But this movie and The Whale both could have been plays, right? There are all these like one setting or
Well, the whale was a play, right?
Right.
Adopted from the guy's play and then made into a movie. This was a novel that was adapted into a film that very much plays exactly like a play on the stage. Yeah, like it could have been like a single set basically where it's just this barn and then a couple of like places for other characters to have things happen to them slightly outside of the barn or what have you.
Right.
It's just I've always, and this is something I've struggled with in my writing when I'm trying to write fiction, is I often want to have my characters have these sorts of philosophical conversations with one another, but it is an incredibly difficult thing to pull off, having it sound like a natural conversation between two actual human beings.
Oh, you should talk to Aaron Sorkin about that.
Right, that's what I mean. Usually it sounds like shit.
How dare you.
Sounds great.
And it's just hard to make it sound natural coming out of the mouths of...
Just make everyone have gone to Harvard.
Right, but that's the other thing, is that further, these women who are systematically denied an education and aren't even taught to read and write, and have their entire knowledge base is what they've memorized out of the Bible from the things that they've had spoken to them, along with the necessities that they have of like how to maintain the farm, right, to keep the homestead going. Right. And they instead come across as like these incredibly learned and erudite and well-spoken individuals, which sounds just further ridiculous on top of it. And there's also, and I will also complain about this moment, which is that there's a moment, because there's a character in this movie who's a trans character. And the trans character is willfully mute. He will not speak. This is a person who was a female. When she was raped, and then they go to some pains. There's a line of dialogue that feels wildly out of place where it's like, oh, and she didn't become trans because of the rape. It just happened to, it was precipitated by it, but not caused by it, certainly, or something like it's that level of awkward trying not to say that they're only trans because they were raped thing. Right. When like, well, that's what we're dealing with here, so I don't know what you're trying to hide. But that character does not talk until a moment in the film when one of the women address him by his chosen name. I forget what it is, like Wilbur or something. It's not Wilbur, but like a person says, "Oh, Wilbur, what do you think?" And like, first of all, what's Wilbur doing there taking care of the kids if Wilbur's now a dude? They got some strange gender politics here in this women talking movie, obviously.
But I assume since they weren't respecting their choice and they weren't calling him by the name, like they probably were on the outs with the dudes, the rapey dudes, right? So he wasn't going to go help bail one of them out. Like, what would be the point of that?
I know, but like to have the person suddenly decide that they're going to talk after being willfully mute when someone finally uses their name is like this weird, like it's a
like
flashing
Jay and Silent Bob.
It's a flashing neon sign of moralizing nonsense in a movie that is already sort of like super freighted with this obvious big dialectical questions going on between different philosophical ideas. Like it feels awkward and weird, and it just doesn't belong in the goddamn movie.
It's interesting that the Oscar people did not have those problems because the adapted screenplay Oscar went to Women Talk and Sarah Polley, right? So like, the stilted language from here and there wasn't an issue.
Apparently not. With all of these sorts of things, all of these movies that are more about ideas than they are about characters and story, it ends up feeling empty to me. It feels like an intellectual exercise more than it feels like I just can't get involved in the dramatic narrative of the thing. And so like it's interesting. I appreciated watching the movie. I thought it was cool. Yeah. I thought the performances were awesome. The Mara, whichever of the Mara sisters is in this movie, was really good in it. A couple of the other performances were really good too. There's a criminal underuse of Frances McDormand, who speaks like twice in the movie and then just looks severe for the rest of it. But yeah, it's fine. It's a good movie. Number 7 on my list. I had my problems with it. Number 6, I stuck Elvis on there.
That was one of the 2 movies that were pretty much shut out, right? I mean, Banshees of Inisherin, which was higher up on your list, also didn't get anything.
Right. Again, we talked about Elvis at some length. We don't have to go into that again. I put Tar at number 5, even though I did not yet see Tar. I suspect that it will end up even higher, given my feelings about the rest of the movies. Like, if I like it at all, I suspect that I'm going to like it a great deal.
I did like Tar. Yeah, Tar is good. I mean, basically, it's a, like the meat. Maybe you won't like it. Maybe it's a little heavy-handed at times, but like it's kind of like Me Too, but like a woman doing it.
Right, and she's a compelling character apparently, right? Like it's not a political screed. It's not like the She Said movie or something like that. Like it's an actual movie about an actual compelling character.
Right.
And like if you like Cate Blanchett, then I think that you probably will be disposed to liking this movie. If you don't care for Cate Blanchett, you probably won't.
Who doesn't care for Cate Blanchett? Yeah. She's great.
Yeah, she's pretty great. Number 4 on my list, I put the eventual Oscar winner. They won 7 awards last night. They swept all of the important awards, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I went ahead and just bought because it was not available to stream on any of the subscription services that we subscribe to. And I had a feeling that I would like this movie a great deal and that I would be not disappointed to end up owning it so I could watch it again. And I am glad that I bought it. It's a weird fucking movie, and that's the bulk of what I said in my review of it. It's weird, and it's weird to the point of being random, and its randomness is cute to the point of being cloying sometimes. And its randomness doesn't always serve the story in a way that I think randomness desperately needs to serve the story if it's going to mean anything. It's not an absurdist thing in the way that these guys' first movie was an absurdist thing. Their first movie was Swiss Army Man.
I didn't know that.
With Paul Dano and Harry Potter guy.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah, I really liked that movie, and its absurdism worked within that world. This is not an absurdist movie, and so all of the random shit that doesn't appear to tie to anything didn't quite work for me in the same way.
Did you see Turning Red, Abe?
No, did not.
It is the Disney, not Pixar, but Disney animation, came out within the last couple years.
Oh, it came out this year. It was nominated. Last year or this year or something like that.
It's the same movie.
Is this the one where the kid, like, where they're nervous, they turn red? It's
a story about a girl, and, like, the allegory is that she's getting her period, but she has these powers that she can't control. There's a mother that is very controlling. There's lots of Asian imagery.
They're Asians.
And there's, like, at the end, spoilers, there's, like, this plane of existence, and like whether or not she will go through this plane of existence. It's the same movie.
Oh, wow. But no IRS sex dungeon.
No, but there is a raccoon.
Okay. And no leaping onto a butt plug in order to
that you know of. Who knows what they animated real small.
You know what's weird is in retrospect, I wonder what people will think of this movie in like 5 years, because not only did it basically sweep at the Oscars. I mean, I mean, I don't know the last time so many of the major awards went to one movie. It was
like Titanic.
Yeah, critically acclaimed and a commercial success, like over $100 million for this like little small budget whatever movie. Like every category it checks off. And if the Oscars ever decides to release the vote results, maybe like 10 years later or something, they should do that. I want to know what the gap is, because I think this movie won by comfortable margins in each category.
It seems like it, and I enjoyed the performances. I thought they were fine. I thought that, like, there's some uproar about Jamie Lee Curtis beating out what's her name from Black Panther.
And although I thought the issue should have been with the Banshees of Inisherin supporting actress. Like, she should have won it. I mean, Marvel,
she was spectacular.
Yeah, like a Marvel
she absolutely
movie.
should have won it. In any other normal year, that role is like the obvious Oscar winner in a supporting role kind of thing. She was fantastic and sort of the rational heart of the Banshees movies that we'll talk about in a minute here.
Yeah.
Angela, like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
She played dress up in front of a green screen for 15 minutes.
It should be.
I didn't think that Jamie Lee Curtis was particularly spectacular or anything, but she has this whole career, and like the option is either you give it to the spectacular performance in the Irish period piece movie, or you give it as a life achievement award or whatever.
Which I think,
and that's what they ended up doing.
I think that was the thrust of the complaining with Angela Bassett, because she too is making a similar argument. Like, I was in that other movie like 30 years ago. I didn't get it, and here I am again, and I didn't get it.
Yeah, well then, don't be in a stupid Black Panther 2 Marvel movie. Be in something else.
I will say the award is being nominated. I don't think any other person has been nominated for best whatever from a current Marvel movie, right? I mean, like that.
Right.
That alone.
She's the first. I think she's the first acting nomination to come out of the entire MCU.
So
42
take that
movies
win. Yeah,
later.
you weren't like in the running to win the whole thing. That'd be
Also, like, don't actually care about winning an Oscar because they're pretend. It doesn't matter.
yeah. It just was unfortunate for her because the camera that had the Jamie Lee shot, when they're about to announce, was also capturing Angela Bassett, and you can kind of see she wasn't particularly happy.
It's not easy to lose gracefully on television. I never hold that against anybody.
You just applaud. What do you mean? Did they say some other name?
Lose.
Good job.
You didn't lose anything.
Yeah, but you're sitting there around the people who most want you to win. Like, it's not even about you at that point. It's about the fact that you're sitting there with your family and they all wanted you to win.
Right.
And so now you have to pretend on their behalf and hope that they're pretending on your behalf. Like, it's this big awkward thing. Again, I don't hold it against anybody for not being able to mask their true emotions in that one awful moment on television in front of everyone.
I do.
That's fine. I can't overstate how weird this movie is, and I do not believe that the vast majority of people who watched it understood it or finished it. And like that's the you said that you want to see the breakdown of how the votes went.
Yeah.
I want to see the percentage of Academy voters who actually finished this fucking movie because I don't think it's actually very high, and I don't believe them if they just say that they did. This is a movie. This is the last movie I think I ever want to watch with my mother. And that's accepting, of course, like all of the discussing pornography and like other inappropriate sexual situations that I don't want to find myself witnessing with my mother. But like my mother,
she's very bad at watching movies.
She's not great at watching movies because she gets like 3 minutes in and it's like, what is going on here? Who is this?
Oh, there's a very good little meme out there that's like character steps on screen. My mother says, "Who's that?"
Right. Like, I don't know. We're watching this for the first time too. But like the idea of watching this with anybody who does that, who says just what the hell is going on in this movie 15 times in the first 25 minutes that a movie is happening, rather than just letting it unfold in front of you. Like, I just don't. We cannot watch this movie together. Because further, no amount of like pressing pause and trying to explain it is going to make anything any clearer, right? It's just sort of a movie that you have to allow to wash over you. It's like, it's multiverse, and they do if they do a weird thing, they create a path and they can go get new skills or whatever. It's like, this is a very stupid movie.
There are
ultimately.
like two rocks talking to each other, so very it's kind of hard.
That's when I liked the movie. Those two rocks talking. That was the best part to me.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting movie, and I will enjoy revisiting it. It's weird to me that, similar to the women talking thing, there's another scene where we are centering how important it is to acknowledge someone's identity in a way, right? Like it makes it very much of this moment, of this cultural moment, where the girl has this freak out over the fact that her mother won't tell her father that the daughter is a lesbian.
Right.
Which I get. Like, fine, it's important to people.
Especially
it's just weird to me that we make this a big portion of the movie is centered around validating this person's identity, and then we get to the end of the movie. It's like, fuck you for validating my identity. Now you think it's about you, don't you, Mom?
Right. You can't win. I mean, it's more about connecting, right, than validating.
But that's the thing. It's also a mother-daughter movie.
Right.
And like, sorry, my mom can't win. There's nothing she can do. I feel bad. She listens. I'm sorry. Like, I'm like, your hair's too short. You should grow it.
But this movie...
And then she grows her hair. I'm like, your hair's too long. Why is your hair so long? Like, she just can't win.
Did this movie win because it was actually the best picture, or like, I mean, not that matters exactly, but didn't it fulfill all of the various sort of political points that need to be fulfilled in this particular cultural moment for this to just be the movie of the year, and it doesn't matter?
I think it just checked a lot of boxes. So you can take that point and it would be accurate, but also the way that I see it is if the Oscars they're trying to reward, like they're trying to send a message, like, okay, so you have a movie that's not it's an original, right? It's not some part of franchise like Creed 11, right? It's not a Marvel movie. It's not a big budget movie. It's just a simple movie made by these people who had maybe one or two movies before. It was a spectacular success, basically slowly building. I think opening weekend was like 500,000, right? It was kind of one of those slow, built movies. Word of mouth got people out to see it, and then they win all these Oscars. So it's like I think a good like story from that vantage point, and I think it's more that than anything else because like none of the movies, and that's generally the case. I think there are outlier years where it's like clear which is the best picture. Most of the time, it's like 2 or 3 movies people will gravitate toward to say, okay, Banshees of Inisherin and Tar and Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you give it to any one of those 3, or my James Cameron movie, which I know was out of the running, but like if you give it to like one of 3 movies, you could do that every year. Like was No Man's Land really that great the other year, or Coda the other year, or I don't like Shape of Water, but like there's a lot of years where it's just like just give it to somebody, and if you're gonna give it to somebody, it's a worthy movie in that respect.
All right, and then one last point on this movie that I'll make is it's weird to me to give these guys the directing award when if I have to pick a part of the movie that doesn't work for me, it's sort of it's a hard thing to point to, but there's something ineffable about the directing of this movie that sort of didn't work for me. Right. And if there's something that I really believe about this movie, despite having none of the knowledge necessary to make this claim, it's that this movie was made. All of its success was found in the editing room. I have no reason to believe that other than the evidence before my eyes of watching the film. Right. But like this could have been a complete fucking disaster of a movie. And instead it wasn't. It actually sort of worked. And I think that was basically all done in the editing room. And I'm sure that they had a great deal of input on that process. And so, I'm not dumping on them entirely, these Daniels guys. It's weird to me that they get awarded the director award, when to me, like the one thing that was sort of holding this back was some of the choices that were made in the script and in the directing. But it was an interesting and good movie.
I think directing and best supporting actress, basically it's kind of like it rode the coattails of the movie overall. Like basically there was just such enthusiasm for all the major categories that it just kind of won that section.
Yeah, and the kid from the grown-up
Short
Goonie,
round.
The grown-up Goonie winning the thing was the very heartwarming moment of the night, and
he was good.
And he was good.
He was great.
Yeah.
He was like great in it.
The daughter was really good. I mean, they gave it to Jamie Lee Curtis because it's gets an achievement because she's been around
costumes,
forever. But
those costumes, if that hadn't won, that's bullshit, but it did. So they're safe.
No, she was good too, and it was again good performances all around, good movie. I'm just not sure that it was the best movie of the year
because Maverick was.
Also, it's interesting to me, and now this is stupid culture war shit. We had a couple of moments watching this where it felt like these Asian folks were giving succor to the conservative movement, and I think conservatives are too stupid to see it a lot of the time. But like when and this is just a coincidence of phrasing, but when Michelle Yeoh gets up there after winning the Best Actress, and she's like, "Don't let anybody tell you that you're past your prime," which is a reference to CNN's Don Lemon taking a dump on Nikki Haley, which is hilarious. That like this is now we're in like liberal Hollywood, but Michelle Yeoh is getting up there and sort of in a backwards sort of way identifying with Nikki Haley. That was amusing to me.
I think it overlaps that, but it is, I assume, a very common issue that women face, right? Especially in Hollywood,
yes,
right?
Certainly.
So. But
but that was
tracks.
specifically a call out to the Don Lemon thing from a few weeks ago.
Right.
And then also, all of this talk of the American dream, like the fact that Short Round gets up there, and forgive me, I just would rather not mispronounce his name, which I definitely would if I tried to say it.
Short Round, so you're doing great.
He gets up there and he's like, I spent a year on a boat. I came out of labor camps or whatever the fuck it is he says in his
He
speech.
said refugee
Refugee
Yeah, a
camp.
camp,
refugee camp. And like, this is the American dream. This is what it's all about. Like, that's something that entire audience, you could feel their buttholes clenching when he started saying that, because that phrase is specifically not acceptable in certain circles anymore.
Really?
We don't
you
talk
think
about...
people talk about the American dream? You think that's like a contentious issue? People are...
Absolutely it is, certainly in the last few years, because the American dream has been denied to many people of color. It's been denied. It's an American dream only for white privileged people, right?
Right, but
and it's
yeah, and they can bring examples of those denials, but whenever there's a success, you would think there would be no objection to that. Also, he didn't go into it, but both Kiwei Kwan, I want to say the name if that's correct.
short round is
Pronounced
fine.
short round.
And Michelle Yeoh, I think they're both Vietnamese backgrounds. Maybe wasn't there like a war? America was involved in Vietnam, and the reason why he was a
Is
refugee.
Michelle Yeoh Vietnamese? I didn't
No,
realize
I think she
that.
grew
No,
up
that
like in
doesn't sound
Malaysia or whatever.
Vietnamese.
But I think she's
Let's Google that.
of
shit.
Vietnamese background. But I know Short Round, as you want to call him, is from Vietnam. And when he was a refugee, he must have been a product of like right after the war ended, and then they had the little issue with Cambodia. So
Well, Cambodia had a real problem.
yeah, they started killing a lot of people.
I'm not trying to make a big stink of it. I was just amused by this there was a bit of an American conservative gloss to the
he's
proceedings as a result of these awards going to people who were singing the praises of dreaming and having your dreams come true. And it's just not the sort of thing that it's not the sort of thing that we'd be as quick to accept if Austin Butler got up there and started talking about it.
In an Elvis accent.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, All Quiet on the Western Front, which
I
I
think-
actually really liked this movie. Did you see this? It's
Yeah.
on Netflix.
I really did like it, and that that little thing won it the best whatever Oscar.
Right. So basically the only thing I said about this movie in my little capsule review was that I really liked the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then the soundtrack wins for best score,
Yeah.
which I was very pleased with. I'm going to play it here because your rendition of it, while convincing, Abe, doesn't give us the full feeling that you can get from it when actually hearing it.
Oh, that's very different than what Abe was saying.
Anyway, that's the sound
It's like
effect.
the Ninja Turtles.
It's great. It sounds very modern and like almost out of place, but when watching this movie, it very much works every time it pops up. Further, I don't believe that they only spent $20 million
Right? It looks
on this
a
movie.
lot
I
more-
have
yeah.
no idea what Netflix's incentive would be to lie
Right.
about how much money they spent on this movie. But every little piece of information I could find insisted that they only spent $20 million on it. And I swear, like, if you told me they spent $20 million on the makeup, I'd be like, oh, yeah, that checks out. I believe that. Because this movie looks spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, it's about people dying, and it sucks. By the way, it's a testament to my terrible memory that an hour and 20 minutes into this movie, I was like, wait, I read this book like recently, because some of the characters' names were like familiar, and the title is really from the book, but I didn't make the connection until halfway through.
The title is really from the book.
To say nothing of the fact that it's like one of the most famous books of the last
even I read
120 years.
Probably in 8th grade. I think we sorted out that it was in 8th grade that I read this.
Okay. But no,
Just thumbs down.
Great movie. I don't know if it's better than 1917, which is the most recent World War I movie of similar vintage that is worth talking about.
Right.
But along those lines, like if you're like, I'm going to watch a weekend of World War I movies, like you could do worse than picking All Quiet on the Western Front and 1917.
I will say that the movie Babylon did not work overall, but I'm surprised it didn't win any music-related stuff, because at least that was the one good part of that movie, but it didn't win anything.
All right. Number 2, I have Triangle of Sadness. And Abe, did you end up seeing Triangle of Sadness?
The one movie I have not seen. I'll circle back.
Gotcha.
Oh, you'll like it.
So this was on Hulu. It's another one of the weird ones. And I think the reason that I like it as much as I did comes down to I usually like it when a good writer treats his characters with a great deal of contempt. And the writer here treats all of these characters with a great deal of contempt, including the ones. It's sort of what I liked about Parasite, and what I didn't understand about the discourse around Parasite a few years ago was that it was this big class war thing, and that like we're supposed to feel good about the impoverished people, the people who are getting one over on the rich folks. Whereas the portrait painted of the lower class people in that movie is not a very flattering one. And the same goes here. Like there's a little bit of class warfare stuff that goes on here, but it's not like it's just a bunch of the people who are in the service class or the lower class are not a bunch of victims. They turn out to be sort of unseemly themselves in important ways. And it's by this guy who's made interesting movies in the past, apparently, before. I haven't seen any of them. Now I'm interested to see his other movies. But it was fun. And then number 1 ends up going to The Banshees of Inisherin, which is the Irish...
Curiously about some white dudes.
I don't care for that particular reduction of my feelings about this movie.
I should have called it man talking.
Reducing. It's just funny.
Did you see Banshees of Inisherin?
I did.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
I don't remember you talking about it. What was your feeling of this movie?
I think I said I do like it, and I probably did say that. Hopefully I said that. One thing
You did.
about the Colin Farrell character, there's nothing more infuriating than that type of person. This fucking dipshit who's like imposing on you, like they won't leave you alone. And then there's something that goes sideways. I don't know. Was it his pet or something happened to?
Oh, it's the spoilers. There's lots of spoilers.
The donkey?
The donkey was like that little ass
Yes.
thing. And it's like, oh, you've made a sworn enemy for life. It's like you're just concocting this just so we continue to interact. Like, I wanted you to leave me alone. I've cut all of my fucking fingers, and you're still not leaving me alone. I would have just killed this guy. I know he's a little slow, but like, fuck that guy.
I could see you sending this movie off to a couple of your co-hosts on the Biffler and just like with no added commentary, just being like, why don't you check this movie out? And imagine I'm Brendan Gleeson. Yeah, that's all. I say nothing further. I think this is actually a really, really great movie, and not just because it's two white dudes having brotherly problems. Again, I loved the performance by the actress, the woman who plays the sister, whose name escapes me at the moment. I always like Colin Farrell. I think that he's reliably good and should be in more things probably, but I guess he picks his projects carefully. It is a movie that is probably an allegory for war. They make that pretty plain with the war happening
like
across the sea there.
Or what's going on? Like, it's like 1923.
Yeah, the Irish.
So a brief, I looked it up briefly because I don't know my Irish history, but there was a brief year-long civil war in 1923 or 1922 through 1923 that presaged a lot of the troubles, so to speak, that would follow for the next 80 years or so.
It was along Catholic Protestant lines even then?
Yes,
okay.
the same thing that they've always been fighting about, apparently. And their relationship obviously is meant to sort of like, you know, we were best friends and nobody's even sure what the hell the problem is here. And you're not being rational about this. And it's just not fair. And it further, in a way that the reason that they always make war movies and will always make war movies is that it gives unremarkable dummies like our boy who you're talking about a chance to elevate themselves into something more interesting, right? Like you find yourself in an extreme situation and that reveals something about the character in, for better or for worse, ultimately. And I just thought it worked very, very well without being overbearing. I didn't think that they were whacking you over the head with the fact that this was actually an allegory for war. I just thought it all worked very well. And it is enjoyably absurdist in its way. Like, no person has ever actually chopped off all of the fingers on their hands
Yeah.
so that their best friend, ex-best friend, will stop talking to them and then had the donkey die as a result. Obviously, that isn't the sort of thing that happens. And I was moved by the parts that I was supposed to be moved by, right? So when he gets his ass beaten by the local constabulary, and then Brendan Gleeson finally is like, well, this isn't okay, and he knocks the cop out and helps him get back to his house. That you can tell that there's a lot of feeling there. And I also, so not only is it war, not only is it a question of like relationship between these two dudes who've known each other their whole lives, and then also the thing with the sister, and she needs to go find something else. She needs to get the fuck out of here to figure something out with her life. There's also an interesting argument at the core of this about finding meaning in life, and what does it mean to do something that matters to anyone beyond your own short time here on the planet. And is it enough just to chat and have good talks and have meaningful relationships with the people around you? Or is there some way that you can really become immortal and become more than the 60 or 70 years that you're here on this planet if somebody is still playing the piece of music that you write 50 years from now? And like, what does it mean to create good art if it means sacrificing the relationships that you have in the moment? Like, that is interesting conversations to have and things to think about.
Why do they have to be mutually exclusive?
Right, but that's what I'm saying, is they don't always, but they sort of have this argument about like the virtue of the genius, right? So we've always accepted the unstable genius asshole as like, well, you put up with him because he makes this great art. And it's like, I don't know, is that actually something that it has to be mutually exclusive or not? And it has that conversation without bashing you over the head with it, unlike some of the other movies that were nominated this year. And I'm disappointed that it didn't win. I would have been fine with Everything Everywhere sweeping all of the performance categories that it won and the editing and all of that, but I would have much rather that a different movie had won Picture of the Year.
Although when Harrison Ford came out to give out the Best Picture, I know that no one's supposed to know what's in the envelope, but that seems like...
It did seem like a bit of a giveaway. Like, here comes Harrison Ford, and there's Short Round down there going crazy.
Spielberg is like a few rows down. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, a fine night, rolling around in the decadence of the culture last night. No complaints about Jimmy Kimmel. He was fine.
It was great.
They always try to do these bits, and the fun in them is that they generally don't work, but it's just them trying to make it work. It's always funny. Like, he was doing, I guess they needed to clear the stage for Rihanna. And so he's like, let me do some bullshit Q&A thing. Just made up these questions. And
look, any opportunity to make fun of Matt Damon should be taken. And so that's what he did there in the audience. That was good.
Right.
I liked his stupid joke about how should we or should we not include Robert Blake, who was found civilly liable for murdering his wife, who died this year. Should we include him in the in memoriam segment or not? I thought that was great. Yeah. Like, I love these moments, the sort of Gervaisian moments of puncturing the pomposity in the room in a loving sort of way. Like, that's what I tune in for. That was fine. And I saw somebody complaining about that, like it was inappropriate to make a joke about domestic violence in that way. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Relax yourself.
Don't be so precious. Yeah.
I thought he could have pushed it a little bit further along those lines.
I think maybe
but otherwise
since
it was
a year later, they're like, let's just kind of get through this, and then we can circle back to pushing the envelope in future years. Because this is a very like, let's just get through this.
Right.
And
one thing that I would change as a rule, if I were the producer of this show and I was talking to the talent, I was like, all right, Kimmel, you can make literally any joke you want to make. Do not joke about how long the show is. First of all, it's never funny.
Right.
Like, no one has ever come up with a good joke about how long the show is. because it's just a fact, right? Like it's just what it is. It's a long show. Right. It's going to go 3.5 hours. Nobody fucking cares, right?
He went back to that well a bunch of times, right? Throughout the evening, it was like he mentioned that
they always do. There's always jokes about how long the show is.
Right.
It's like a feature of the whole thing, and it's like just drop it. Literally anything else would be better than another joke about how long it's going to be.
They should have at least once tried the gimmick that he was making fun of at the beginning, where he had the dancers kind of dance you, kind of encircle you, and just they should do it.
A callback to that would have been great.
Ratings were up yet again. The good thing about the ratings for all these different shows going record lows is inevitably they're going to tick back up, and you can say, "Oh, look at this, it's up."
Yeah,
it's like 18.7 million.
Rebounded to like 18 million or something. I think was the number I saw.
What they have,
no,
not 40 million like the olden days, but that was going to happen no matter what. Like, it had nothing to do with the quality. I mean, it could have been. There were plenty of dog shit Oscars back in the day, but the way people consume television gave you 40 million no matter what. So it's not like it's 18 million because it's that much worse. It's the same time.
Right, and it just is what it, like I know that I guess we all have to play like in the same way that we all want to play general manager of our favorite baseball team or whatever. But like, who fucking cares? What are we talking about?
Yeah.
Like, watch the Oscars or don't watch the Oscars. ABC made over $100 million selling ads for the thing. I'm sure they're perfectly happy with themselves.
Right.
Like, it's fine. Relax.
The only thing I don't understand is the allocation of time. Like, sometimes, they're trying to trim where they can. You don't want to just, like baseball, have like a clock or whatever, right? But some of the bits, it's like, what? Like, who is that into, like The Rock doing a bit like where he's pretending whatever with Emily, what's her face, and then the possibly sick Elizabeth Banks doing a thing with the cocaine. I mean, like, there's a lot of fat to trim there. Like, just get to it. Why do you need to have these?
Right, and the overwhelming majority of the time, the bits don't work.
Right.
Like the Rock didn't, like, that felt just weird and out of place. I thought that the Elizabeth Banks and the Cocaine Bear thing actually kind of worked that for me, but like I can see why a lot of people wouldn't like it. There is definitely plenty of other shit that can go. Certainly, you also don't want it to just be like, celebrity walks out, celebrity says, and here are the nominees. Like you want it to have
a little
something.
Right.
Anyway, we can move on from the Oscars. I want to talk briefly about various ways the culture war is playing out in increasingly stupid and disconnected ways. First, I would point to a blog that I wrote called "The Best Part of the Culture War is that you can fight it literally anywhere over nothing." There's a New York Times article last week on, quote, the MAGAfication of North Idaho College. Did you happen to read that article?
Yes, I did.
The thing that struck me out of this, and we don't have to go into the gnarly details, basically there's a community college in North Idaho that got upset because somebody at the college released a DEI statement following the death of George Floyd. Like, whatever.
It's a shame he died or something. Like, it wasn't even like
they need. Yeah. Well, like they need to do their part in combating systemic racism and on like the normal fucking bullshit that you would hear out of well-meaning people in the face of something awful like the George Floyd thing happening. This upset the local Republicans to the point where they activated themselves and elected candidates to the board of trustees of this college who would remake it in their image, right? Who would try to make it more in line with the conservative culture war agenda as opposed to being overrun by the liberal agenda. And I believe, just described like all of the details that this fight is about. Like, unless the reporter just left out anything interesting or substantial from his reporting, which seems unlikely, it seems much more likely that this is just a fight about nothing between conservatives who just don't want the liberals to be in charge anymore.
Right.
And it doesn't appear to be anything else that they're hanging this specific fight on. And increasingly, those are the sorts of, like, granted, we talk about the specifics here often enough, whether it's the goofy trans stuff or the banning of books, either Florida with the conservatives doing it or with liberals trying to get the the bad words taken out of Roald Dahl and R.L. Stine books. There are smaller fronts where this war is being fought, so to speak. But largely, it's just like weird ephemeral feelings between people who are convinced that their way of life is at stake or something along those lines.
But it's not just feelings, it's language and like signaling, right? So like the likely reason why there was this reaction is because the diversity, equity, inclusion did a thing. And so there's an association with DEI to being some sort of liberal scheme, just like, if somebody says Black Lives Matter, they're going to associate that with a left thing, right? And so there, you could say some very generic statement like it's a tragedy that George Floyd were to die and we should all do more, blah, 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 something just basic statement, but it'll be seen as, hey, you are on the other side of this. Even though, like, I'm not saying I'm on the side of just killing people, but like, you're using language that I wouldn't use, and so therefore you're not in my tribe, and so I'm gonna try to unseat you or kind of drown you out or do something. It's all because of the language they use. So if some people say certain things, they'll say, "Oh, you're one of those people," just by virtue of using those words. Right.
Along these same lines, there was an article in USA Today written by Susan Page talking about a poll. Headline, Americans divided on whether woke is a compliment or insult. And I'll actually play a brief 15-second clip here from the Slate Political Gabfest because John Dickerson sort of lays out the point very quickly.
So that's the Democratic side. On the Republican side, it's everything is woke that you want to attack. Politics right now is, in the Republican side, not about affirmatively going for things, but defending against the incursions by the socialists and the woke. And DeSantis owns that territory. The problem from a general election perspective actually is the USA Today did a poll, and it turns out that 56% of those surveyed said that the term woke means to be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. So it doesn't have the negative connotations that MAGA does, but that's for another day. At the moment, DeSantis has woke. He can also make this competence pitch.
Right. I will stop it there because I think that Dickerson makes an important mistake, and it's the same mistake that Susan Page makes in interpreting the results of this poll. So the question asked was, thinking again about what it means to be woke, which of the following comes closest to your view, even if neither is exactly right? 56% of respondents of all different demographic groups, so just the total, 56% said it means to be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. And 39% said that it is to be overly politically correct and police others' words. I don't think that it is correct for Dickerson and Susan Page to say that that means that 56% of people have a positive impression of what it means to be woke. Right. It just means that they're acknowledging that it means to be, quote unquote, informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. That doesn't mean that they think that being woke is good. That what Dickerson is doing there is he's saying, in being informed, being educated, and being aware of social injustice, most people must think that that's good. Right. No, you're talking about a significant portion of the American public who has a negative view of going to college, right? You're talking about a significant portion of like some large percentage of Republicans who disagree that education is necessarily a good thing and that being informed is necessarily a good thing if what we mean by informed is that you take in all of the liberal media all of the time, right? That you just get all of your information from fake news. I think that they are doing a very bad job of understanding what is in the minds of people who are responding to this, or potentially in the minds anyway, right? All I'm saying is that there's no way that 56% of people who might agree that that's the definition of woke, therefore further believe that it is good to be woke, and that being woke is something to be proud of. Or something.
Although I do wonder, like, if they did if they asked a question in the right way, and I don't know what that is.
Well, they sort of do. Because they say, what percent do you consider it a compliment or an insult? Okay. And 60% of Republicans say it's an insult, which validates exactly the thing that I'm saying here. Okay. And it's in the same poll.
Right. But see, okay, so that is a better question and response, because that's where I figured things are. Like, so it's 60-40 within the Republican Party, or 60 and then whatever else is the rest of the 40.
Right. 60% of Republicans say it's an insult, and 14% say it's a compliment.
Okay. And the other people just have no opinions or whatever.
Right.
They're just like whatever. And do they have a number for the Democratic side? Is it?
Yeah. So 40% consider it. This is independents or all Americans. 40% consider it an insult. 32% consider it a compliment. Democrats, 25% consider woke an insult, and 46% consider it a compliment. So you combine there, is woke a compliment or an insult thing with the definitions that they give, and I don't think that you can assign a moral valence to the definitions.
Right.
The more, right?
But also there is a lack of interest in giving one definition for it. I think the people that want to use it as a negative, they prefer it to be kind of a catch-all. Like, it's whatever I don't like, or, it's what they're doing. They're these goody two-shoes, or supposedly goody two-shoes, but they're, really assholes. The problem is, like, woke, like, I always compared it to, like, red pill or, awake. Like, I think conservatives sometimes will say awake, not woke, whatever. Like, people are trying to, like, be aware of things, like you were just kind of living your life and you weren't aware of these underlying things. All the MAGA people that are talking about deep state, that's like a awakening to that fact, right? I mean,
right. They absolutely use the same language.
Right.
They've been red pilled, or they've been MAGA pilled,
right? But you're kind of saying the same thing.
Right?
That's why it hurt. Governor DeSantis and others. I mean, especially DeSantis. He wants to make that be the negative, but it's such a vague kind of thing. I think people understand that it's often used as an attack, but it's never been given a clear definition, because it's not just one thing. It's a lot of things.
Right. To the point where DeSantis goes on television and in front of crowds today and is insisting that the Silicon Valley Bank in California, the 16th largest bank in the country, failed because it's too woke, which is bonkers. Right. It is not at all in conversation with reality in any way whatsoever.
But that's, kind of going to the point you were making about how culture war is over nothing. In many ways, it's culture war also over anything, right? Because if it's over nothing, it could just be for whatever. Anything that happens, you can just say that, right? Like anything that happens negative, just say, oh, there they go again. It's because they went woke. And that will carry some weight with some people.
It won't convince anybody who isn't already on your side, though, importantly. But it will. And DeSantis is currently in consolidate the base away from Trump as much as possible mode right now. And I wonder if – and I don't know what sort of pivot he could conceivably make a year from now if he got the nomination, where he could get away from this everything is woke stuff, or if he would think that would be to his benefit. But I don't think that he can win. Barring the fact that Joe Biden is going to be way too fucking old. Yeah. So, like, the substance of the conversation might not actually matter at all if it just comes down to, do we really want an 85-year-old dude to be the president anymore? Maybe we don't. All right. I do quickly want to discuss this Silicon Valley Bank thing, because I read a punishing amount about it today.
Because I asked him specifically not to.
Yeah. But I think it is I think it is interesting, and I think that I can explain it in a way that is at least understandable. Do you know what happened here, Abe? Do you have any?
My simple understanding of it is that people were spooked about the lack of liquidity, and there was a traditional bank run, where basically people lost confidence, and like in one day, like $40 billion were withdrawn, or I don't know if that number is accurate, but it was like a ridiculous.
In a very short period of time, they attempted to withdraw $42 billion from this bank, which had total assets of just under $250 billion. So they had deposits of, I think the number is $230 billion or something like that. And over the course of a very short period of time, $42 billion worth of those deposits were attempted to be called back by the people who had made them. And the bank was obviously not able to fulfill those requests, because they only had, in terms of liquid assets, something like 6% of the total of that, because that's just how fractional reserve banking is meant to work, right?
I mean,
you bring in $1,000 in deposits, you turn around and immediately loan out that 900 of that dollars, and just having the $100 on hand is supposed to be that is considered plenty liquid enough, as long as people don't come begging for their money
Right.
the next day.
I always thought of it like, like in a society, in a functioning society, like most people go about their day without causing any trouble. They're not committing any crimes. They're not hurting other people. And then the city has the resources to deal with those few who are doing those things. But if everybody did it, like the system would collapse, right? Like there's no way that a society can function if you had 20% of the city were just murderers, right? I mean, there's no
Right.
adequate way to deal with that, right? In that way, basically, there's predictable behavior with a regular bank, and people deposit and they withdraw in predictable ways. So you don't need to have all the money there all at once. But if there's a lack of confidence and people say, I don't trust that you'll have my money when I need it, I'm going to get it now, and everybody goes to the bank, the whole thing falls apart, kind of like with the toilet paper thing that happens when people freak out.
There's a rhetorical device that politicians use. I always hear it in Barack Obama's voice. I'm sure it goes back further than Barack Obama, but it's the "let's be clear" thing. And Elizabeth Warren starts an editorial or an op-ed in the New York Times today with "no one should be mistaken" is her way, which is another way of saying "let's be clear." She says, no one should be mistaken about what unfolded over the past few days in the U.S. banking system. These recent bank failures are the direct result of leaders in Washington weakening the financial rules. And I read this piece with an increasing sense of desperate frustration at what she was doing here, which is not to say that she's doing the same thing that Ron DeSantis is doing, which is pointing and saying, oh, it's woke. That's the problem, is all the woke stuff. But for her to point at one deregulatory move from 2018 as being the only and prime cause of what happened here is to tell it's not to tell as dumb a lie about the world as Ron DeSantis is telling when he blames everything on woke, but it is not to tell the truth about what's going on here. It's a very complicated situation that is not just about whether or not we rolled back some particular aspects of the Dodd-Frank financial reforms in 2018. And I can prove it by the fact that there are regulations in place that would have found out these problems and allowed regulators to stop this from happening had they just been doing their job over the course of the last 3 years. Right. The solutions to the problem that led to this bank failure, which is a big catastrophic thing that should have not happened the way that it happened, or arguably should just be allowed to happen. And I think that is an important part of this conversation too. The point is that this could have been stopped with the laws that are already on the books, and Elizabeth Warren is not telling the truth about the fact that what changed in 2018 led directly to this result.
This is very reminiscent of the train derailment, right, where there was a rollback of some previous policy, but it had no connection to the accident. Similar to this, you can point to something that was rolled back from Dodd-Frank years ago, but that alone wasn't the cause of this case. But people will want to draw that connection because it's advantageous politically to say
nothing of the fact that the true precipitating events here is all of the profligate spending and the huge injections of cash into this economy that have gone on for the last 3 years since the COVID stuff happened, right? And so she's been more than happy to insist on more and more government spending and more emergency spending, and that is what led to this, arguably more than anything else. So this, to get into the specifics here a little bit, the reason that this bank got into trouble is that venture capitalists were absolutely flush with cash in 2019, 2020, 2021 as a result of the pandemic, and we had low interest rates, and so people just kept pouring more and more money into venture capital, and the venture capital firms, the beneficiaries of that, all of these startups in Silicon Valley, had all of this fucking money, and they didn't know what to do with it, so they just stick it in the bank, right? And then the bank is like, well, now we've got all of this money and we don't know what to do with it. And we can't lend any money right now because all of our customers are incredibly flush with cash. So much so that they can't spend it. They just keep giving it to us. And so they do what they believe, foolishly ultimately, is a responsible thing, which is they tie up a huge percentage of their liquid assets in long-term treasury bonds, right? So they think what they're doing is they're shoring themselves up to mitigate risk moving forward by having these what amount to are essentially, from a layman's perspective, an entirely risk-free treasury bond, like a 5-year bond or a 10-year bond that's only going to pay like 1% return, right? The problem with that is that if you put 70% of your money into those treasury bonds and then the Fed turns around and starts raising the rates in an effort to combat inflation. So not only are you losing money because you have now dumped your money into a treasury bond that will not even come close to outpacing the rate of inflation, you're further losing money because the bank down the street is now offering better interest rates because they're getting much better than 1% return on their treasury bonds, right? So you're in a weird way, this what's supposed to be this very stable and sort of financial backbone of your entire enterprise ends up fucking you. It's a weird fact of how banking works, and it's a bummer. But like, you take something that is supposed to keep you solvent, and it actually starts working exactly against you. And so now somebody, and the way that it works is like, now this startup needs to make payroll, and they're not getting all of that sweet VC money as much anymore. So they go back to the bank, and they're like, okay, I need $12 million for payroll. And the problem is that the bank, instead of loaning out that money and making 5 or 6% on that money, and so now they have assets that they can pay you back your initial deposit with, they have to cash out these treasury bonds, and they can't sell them to anybody for anything near their value. They have to sell them at a discount. So if they bought a treasury bond for $100, they can now only sell it for $75. They've just taken a $25 bath. That $25 is gone, and they're in the hole in much the same way that they would have been in the hole in 2008 with these mortgage-backed securities. It's funny, though they're completely different financial instruments, it ends up working in very similar ways.
Right.
And I apologize if that was over everybody's heads, but I read a lot about it today.
Well,
and it's somewhat interesting to me.
Since you're well read on this, well, maybe you can answer this question that I had, which is the way that, on the news, the way they were explaining it is, okay, so this bank is like the 16th largest bank or whatever. This is like the second largest collapse of a bank or a bank failure. They said the larger banks like Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, they have to follow stricter rules, right? And then further down, these other banks, they don't have to meet the same high standards with, making sure your ratios are a certain way where...
Well, yes. So they have to face stress tests. The problem with Elizabeth Warren saying that if this bank had been subject to the same stress tests that the bigger banks are, which, by the way, 100% of the banks that faced those stress tests in the most recent round of them passed. So the question, that's at for these bigger banks, the more stringent one that Elizabeth Warren wants to be in place for these smaller banks as well. The fact that they passed all of these tests, even though all of these bigger banks are actually have very similar problems to what SVB is dealing with, because I found a CNN article that had totaled up all of the low interest treasury bonds, and it's like $600 billion or something for these big banks. So there's a huge pile of money that's still out there that is effectively, they're called long-term holds, but they're just potentially huge drains on the ability of these banks to actually meet their reserve requirements or meet their customers' deposit request if they decided to come after them. And so the way that you described it at the very beginning, where you were like, this was just a classic run on the bank, is 100% correct. And a lot of even the bigger banks, though they claim that the regulators claim that they would survive these stress tests, if something similar happened to them, they absolutely would not, because they would be in a similar situation. And there's no beating a run on the bank. That's why it's such a scary thing. There's nothing in Elizabeth Warren's regulations that she's so insistent upon these smaller banks should have to meet that prevents runs on banks, because it's this weird psychological phenomenon more than anything else.
And that's over the weekend there was intervention, and I thought it seemed like it was a very appropriate time to intervene. The FDIC and the federal government stepping in because you have to account, at least for my reading, you have to account for panicky human behavior, right? The run on the bank is, I don't trust, I'm just going to get mine because on Monday it may not be there, right? And everybody's taking the same thing and the whole thing collapses, right? And so there needs to be an instilling of confidence to say the money will be there and no one else, there's no other entity other than the federal government that can step in and instill that confidence, right? Now, you don't want the government to be footing the bill for bad behavior, right? And that's a concern. Like, okay, then if they...
Right, and by the way, the FDIC, the deposit insurance only goes up to $250,000, right? Which is meant to protect
most people,
normal everyday people.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem is that 92% or something of the investors in this bank, or the depositors of this bank, had deposited funds in great excess of that 250,000. These are not retail bank accounts, right? I mean, these are mostly corporations that are banking here. And there's a huge, the phrase moral hazard, of course, gets used in these sorts of situations, but there's a huge issue with the federal government coming in and guaranteeing 100% of deposits for this bank, rather than stepping in and doing what I think that they should have done, which is putting a halt on withdrawals, right, up to a certain point. You say, we guarantee you your $250,000 up to that point, because that's what the FDIC is meant to do. If you want your money now, you can have $250,000, and we'll make you whole in that way, according to the risks that you knew you were taking when you failed to limit your exposure in such a way, right? You, as this stupid company, put $50 million in this bank, and you were only covered up to $250,000. That's on you, you fucking morons. Right. Like, I don't know why it needs to be on anybody else. So if you can't afford to be illiquid in this way for a short period of time while we figure it out, then that's on you. And we will do our best to sell this bank to somebody else at a great discount, and we will foot the bill for that. But we can't be on the hook for $250 billion, right? We can cover the distance between the discount that we have to give Goldman Sachs or whatever giant monster mega corporation bank wants to come in and ultimately buy these assets. We'll cover the discount that we have to pay to unload this situation on somebody else. But we're not going to cover the entire thing. And instead, they came in and said, basically, because of systemic risk to the entire system that we've just decided exists, we are going to change the law and say there are now no limits.
Well, yeah, because basically they say at least 250. I mean, they can always go more. But again, this goes back to the issue of confidence, right? If you have this contagion, right? And if you have
but what if what we saw over this weekend was a bunch of shithead people who've got tens of millions of dollars in this bank that they don't want to see go up in smoke, who then spend the entire weekend holding a flame to the rest of the economy by being like, if you don't make us whole right now, then we will help engender this feeling of lack of confidence in the entire thing, and we will start causing bank runs as much as we can on the rest of the economy unless you make us whole. Like, that was the sort of rhetoric that was coming out of people who had deep financial interests in being made whole by the federal government, and that's not acceptable. And maybe that's a weird sort of problem of the social media age, where you have these weird VC tech bro influencer types who can have a disproportionate amount of influence on the conversation at large and can sort of hold hostage the entire banking system. Right. But that's not the deal that we made when we set up the FDIC to bail people out up to $250,000, right? And it's weird to me that the Fed or Biden or some combination of the Fed and Treasury and like the weird relationships that go on there can come in and just say, actually, we've got you covered 100% of the way.
I still think
it does nothing for solving this problem going forward. No. It's a Band-Aid, and it only encourages more risky and bad behavior moving forward.
The Band-Aid is important because, again, you don't want to you don't want this to spiral out of control. So their action, I think, is appropriate because they won't have to actually do anything. They're just instilling confidence. But this is a problem because going forward, it should be like the U.S. government is an interested party. I don't care how big or small a bank it is, right? You can be one of the dominoes that fucks up this whole thing, right? So there needs to be legislation that says you can't hold us hostage like this in the future. I mean, in the moment, you have to act and do the right choice. It doesn't matter if some tech bro's benefiting
but
from
also,
it.
and again, I can't stress this enough. A lot of the problem was how much cash we injected into the system that just had nowhere to go. And so all of this money flows into Silicon Valley, into these startups, and they just don't even know what the fuck to do with it. They can't spend it fast enough. They can't come up with products to create to move the money around. So they just have to dump it into the bank, and then the bank doesn't know what to do because they can't lend it out. It's this stupid self-perpetuating
they
system.
They can park the money. They were trying to get even more money back, right? They were trying to use the money to further their profit interest, right? And they got caught. And
right, but they weren't taking. That's the thing, is they were not taking giant risks. They just made a mistake in terms of how big a pile of long-term treasury bonds they built up over a period of time, as opposed to actually putting this money back out into the economy. Like, yeah, they made mistakes. They misunderstood the sort of risk that they were exposed to. But the problem is the giant sums of money that got injected into the system.
If you had more stringent regulations, the idea, you're not going to catch them all, but to get ahead of the problem before it becomes a problem. It's the same thing with the train issue. Anyone that's for deregulation, you have to accept that this is the cost sometimes to cutting corners early on, right? Because inevitably this is going to happen.
They were also further, they're not allowed to explain their actions, which only engenders more panic in the population. So when they sold off $18 billion or something worth of these treasury bonds, and they are prevented by SEC rules from going out there and being like, look, I know this looks bad, but the reason that we're doing this is because we don't have enough to cover our things right now. Like, we are not an insolvent bank. We're just a very illiquid bank. And they're not allowed, according to SEC rules, they have very stringent regulations in place already about what they're allowed to say about the reasons that they're doing these things. And so they could not actually explain themselves. And so that only leads to more of the panic. Right. So there's the irony of regulations getting in the way of actually trying to tamp down a panic rather than having the opposite impact.
A funny thing happened last week when Bob was editing the show. I came downstairs and he had Russell Brand up on the laptop, and I said, I like Russell Brand. I don't know what people don't like about him. And Bob said, he's fine. He does a talking too much thing sometimes. and as it came out of his mouth, he knew what was happening. It was good. I should have gone to bed when you started talking about this instead of.
All right, we can be done with the banking talk.
I'm gonna go to bed because I'm tired and I don't feel good.
All right,
don't be mad at me.
I'm not mad at you. I've been encouraging you to stop showing up for this podcast for 3 years, so I'm not gonna be mad.
Your dad would be so sad. I'm going to bed. Good night.
Good night, Lori.
Good night, Lori. Do we have anything else on the bank stuff before we?
No, although I would like to see how this unfolds, like when more information comes to light, because it seems like, I was reading somewhere that there was some egging on, perhaps. Like there's something seems to have happened with this bank that caused, because somebody was looking back at other failures, and nothing came close to $42 billion in a day or a day and a half,
Right, but that's what I meant when I brought up the influence of these social media platforms and the group chats in spreading what becomes a meme about getting all of your money out of this, and especially when you're a sort of small cloistered community. Apparently this is the go-to bank for a bunch of these. They have fewer than 20 physical locations, right? Banks that are this big usually have hundreds and hundreds of physical branches out there in the world. This is a tiny little bank that happens to have a huge portfolio of assets, or it used to anyway. Now they're not worth anything. And again, I can't stress enough that it is Fed action that did this, and it is a failure on the part of the people who manage this bank to realize that raising of interest rates in an attempt to combat inflation was going to fuck them. But the bottom line is that it was Fed action that ended up causing this to happen. And so there is that argument to be made, that the reason that the government needs to step in and prevent this from having a more widespread negative impact on the market at large is because, in some regard, they are at fault for what's going on here. Let's see if there's anything else. No, I'm free from Lori's complaints about it getting late. I can just...
No, to be fair, it was trending to be at the same exact time episode.
How dare you? I don't know what you're talking about. Not right at all. I blogged about it, but I do think it's worth mentioning here. Jonathan Haidt had I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes, a long piece talking about the problem of like youth depression and anxiety going on here in our bogus future. And he believes, as he would believe probably, that he and his colleague, Greg Lukianoff, correctly identified this issue back in 2014, 2015, when they were writing The Coddling of the American Mind. And I sort of jumped off from that in the blog. I think a lot of this conversation can sort of be reduced to a single point of contention. Now, and I choose reduced for a reason. This is sort of reductionist, and it's oversimple, and there are a million other explanations that are equally valid, probably. But I do think that, and this touches slightly on what I was talking about earlier with the American dream stuff and how we don't accept the sort of basic promise of the American dream in the way that we did more broadly as a wider culture, which is the idea of bootstrapping, like being able to pull oneself up by one's own bootstraps, is a fundamentally American and sort of libertarian ideal that cross-cut in both parties for as long as I can remember, until about 5 years ago. Right? Like until Donald Trump, maybe a little bit before that. But the idea of taking personal responsibility, and was it always sort of semi-bullshit? Of course it was. There are factors that exist beyond your control that keep you from really being fully in charge of yourself and taking control of your situation and fulfilling the American dream for you. Absolutely. But bootstrapping has become, in the last few years, ideologically valenced in a way that I don't think it was before. It wouldn't have been out of character for Bill Clinton to talk about pulling oneself up by one's own bootstraps, right? Now, he would also say it takes a village, and we're happy to help, and all of those things. So the Democrats were always more likely to say, we want to help. You know, it's not a handout; it's a hand up. We want to help you. I think that's an Obama formulation, right? Is helping people along. I think that has redounded in profoundly negative ways through the culture, this sort of bifurcating of the idea of bootstrapping. And like, not to say that the conservatives are right about it necessarily, but I think that it's important that you, like, and now I'm disappointed that Lori left the room because I want to talk about the ways that you would raise kids, but you would never raise kids to be like, actually, everything is fucking hopeless, and nothing that you do in your life is going to make any meaningful difference, and it's all just a question of luck and privilege and like sort of the bare facts of your personality and how well you interview and like the random luck associated with getting ahead. Like, you would never tell a kid that. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You would tell them, work hard, do your best, and eventually things will break in your way one way or another. Or, maybe they won't. But at least you'll have done your best. Right. At least you gave it the old college try. Right. And I think that there's an element of, we've allowed the fact that, I mean, it's funny because it ties into the nihilistic black bagel in everything everywhere all at once. But like, yeah, to a certain extent, everything is fucking meaningless. None of this shit matters. And no matter how hard you try, the universe is still going to take a dump down your throat, and you're gonna fucking die alone, right? Like that is true in some not fundamental always. Important way, but it's nothing to tell a 10-year-old, right? It's nothing to tell someone who hasn't yet figured that out for themselves. Right.
So a couple of points regarding this issue. So first, I think, because every story, whether it's in the news, the CBS morning shows that I watch, or the movies that are made, the televisions, shows, sports, anything. Rags to riches is a well-worn story. People love stories where somebody didn't have something and then they had it through hard work or through whatever, perseverance. You have people overcoming obstacles. And so I think, unless I am just in a bubble, I think those stories are still popular universally, like in America and worldwide. Right.
All right. There's that show that runs on NPR, not Planet Money. It's the one where Guy Raz talks to super billionaires about like people who started companies and made $1 billion out of it. I forget the name of it. How I Built This is the name of the show. And he interviews like the Lululemon guy or whatever the fuck. And it's like, how did you turn this thing from, I used to sell stretchy pants out of the back of the trunk of my 82 Honda Accord. And now I have $1.5 billion. And like, how did you do this? And the last question that he always asks in those interviews is, how much of your success do you attribute to hard work and determination? And how much do you attribute to luck?
Right.
And the ones who are telling the truth say, well, it was obviously a combination of things. But the majority of them attribute a much higher percentage of it to luck, as though there's this like social pressure to insist that I only got to where I got because of luck rather than because of hard work. Right. And like that is a class of people who knows what it takes to actually have success in a place like this. And yeah, does luck factor in? Of course it does. And do people who bust their asses end up only with busted asses and not $1 billion? Of course they do. It happens all the time. It's the overwhelming majority of the cases. When Michelle Yeoh gets up there and says, if you believe hard enough, all dreams can come true. When Short Round gets up there and says it's so important that you believe because otherwise because dreams really can come true if you believe. Yes, it's a necessary condition perhaps, but it certainly by no means is a sufficient condition, or there would be 100 million Oscar winners. Right. There's not. Right. There's only fucking one every year.
So on that point, do you think that because I always thought it should be just priced in to the discussion that there is an element of luck. I mean, if you broaden that, just being in a stable country, right? It's not like a war-torn place. You're not like being told to go to the front lines to like fight or whatever. You can make a pillow company, right, when you're on the Eastern Front, right? But that should just be assumed. I don't understand why you have to go through the performance of like stating that I was, like there's nothing you could do with your luck, good or bad. That's what it is.
It's because of the way the privilege component has come to dominate our entire fucking cultural conversation.
Right, but I think that's
where nobody who achieves anything got anything except because of their privilege. And it's a weird reframing of luck into something that you didn't earn and you must cast off. It's like, no, what are you talking about? I got lucky. I'm sorry that not everybody can get lucky, but also I busted my ass to get what I was going to get.
That's
and
true.
Yeah, did the dice roll my way more times than not? Yes, of course they did.
Right.
It's weird that we can't just admit that.
Right. I think to me
I think that's sort of what you're getting at.
I think people are not communicating honestly when there's a tension there because it doesn't make sense to me. But just to move on to another point that I want to make, which is the bootstraps, right? So again, like I was saying, people love those stories. Somebody made it on the other side. I think from what I gather, people have problems with bootstrap as policy, right? We're not going to do anything. Like crumbling schools, let that be. Live in some, high crime area. Fuck it. I don't care. Healthcare. Fuck it. Like, it's on you, right? And so, like, I think people don't like it when it's like, well, we can do better infrastructurally so people then can get an education and become an accountant. Everybody doesn't need to be LeBron James or, like Michelle. Right. Like people are... Those are great stories, but most people are fine just being an accountant or an engineer, provide for their family, and live, a good life, right?
Right, but if you have now turned the conversation into one with this strict moralistic valence to it, where everything is about this huge moral component, you're no longer having a conversation about policy, right?
No.
You're now having a conversation about what sort of a world do we want to live in or something along those lines. And if you're having it strictly in these stupid ideological terms, you're not actually talking about policy any longer.
Do you think that people, the one uncharitable thing I will say about the people who strongly push for privilege, man. Constantly talking about privilege, constantly talking about luck, all of these things, and having a negative outlook. By the way, I think somebody was saying that if you look at movements throughout the years, there was always an element of optimism about things improving. You have to believe things can get better and then strive to do the things that will accomplish that, right? But if you're just wallowing in the negative, right, that's not very conducive to any sort of forward motion, like to do anything positive. If everything's shit, why even try to do something to make it better? Because it's shit, right? So it's just as a way forward, it doesn't make sense just to kind of wallow in it. But I do wonder how much of this is because the people who are making all of these cases, the NPR types, they live very privileged lives. And I think they're trying to assuage some guilt of the privilege that they see in themselves, right? Or basically, like, I'm just some schmuck, went to some fancy schools. I got all these jobs through networking, like, 'cause we all went to the same places, and I work at a very posh place. And they kind of feel uneasy.
They must know that they're not going to systematize that out of the situation, right? You must know that it is impossible to remove all of the luck and privilege out of this to get to some imagined equity, like whatever equity fucking means to these people, I guess. But like, you're never going to get to a situation where you've made life fair in the way that my fucking 10-year-old wants life to be fair. It's just fucking childish.
Right.
And you can work towards a more perfect future, but like this idea that anything but perfection is completely unacceptable or is some sort of a vast failing of the system is to just tell a lie about nature. Right, which is it's to try to exempt the human animal from the wider project of life in a way that always drives me fucking crazy. Like, this is completely bonkers, off the wall stuff. But for some reason, I'm reminded of a piece I read in the New York Times a few weeks ago about how you should fucking reproduce with short people as a moral imperative. Right? So like.
Was it a short person writing this, or like a advocate of a short person?
I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. But basically, it was like, stop fucking tall people, stop making tall kids because it's just not fair or something. Like, you have a moral duty to go on producing short people or something. It was very stupid. But like, I'm sorry. You're not going to be able to escape the fundamentals of our natural drives, no matter how much technocracy and bureaucracy you put on top of a system. Like, we are still just animals, and very wildly unfair things happen to animals all the fucking time.
Right. And I do think I always find it amusing, and it almost comes across as a cop-out when people fixate on, like, either trivial things or things that there's no real chance of changing. Like, why not focus on things that you can improve, like in society, instead of like how humans interact with each other? Like, you can't really, let's say these words and not those words. Let's come up with some sort of like language for some new statute. There's a lot of just like busy work just to give the appearance of doing something.
I think that the busy work along those lines will continue indefinitely, because I think that we have created a world with the internet, with social media, that only reinforces all of those awful instincts that we have to try to control things that are fundamentally beyond our control. Right. I'll just read the last paragraph in the blog that I wrote about this, because I think I said it fairly succinctly. I've seen plenty of articles through the years about how conservatism and liberalism is basically inborn, that our genetic or very early formative experiences all but concretize the way we ideologically see the world. What if, with the internet, we invented a way of constantly delivering to our brains a reinforcement mechanism whose entire task is to build those foundations deeper and erect those walls higher? Could it result in the sort of spreading of human misery that so many in the national press have been talking about lately? Virtually all of human interaction for all of human history took place face-to-face, or at least voice-to-voice, until the internet transformed the way we interact with each other. It was billed as an empathy machine that would expand our horizons, give us the ability to interact with people of other cultures and see how they are like us, and become more compassionate and understanding human beings as a result. I invite you to look around at what's actually happened
Right.
and insist that the internet has succeeded in those noble goals that it had at the outset.
Right, and I think the one thing I will say about just the impact the internet has had is that, you know, there is some focus on youths and the young girls and the self-esteem issues. It's not just young girls, but in particular young girls. But there's also an impact that it has on older people. Like there's this warped worldview. So for younger people, it's like more like self-esteem, how they believe, what they think of themselves in this world. And then when you're older, the older people, like, you know, the people that just believe any Facebook meme or whatever, our parents' age, right? They seem to have this warped worldview, but as it relates to your neighbor, like the next person, what you think of the other person. And it's kind of fucking up how people view each other, where they think they're spying enemies in their midst. Like, oh, this person he said a word a certain way, and I saw something online or read something somewhere that is associated with an enemy of my tribe. And
Right.
and it causes all this chaos. But so like it's impacting everybody. It's kind of polluting the minds of everyone. But the impact is like slightly different. Maybe when the kids grow up, they'll face a similar issue. But at least right now, the kids have like negative views of themselves, and the older people, it's on other people.
You pointed at the fact that this is a problem afflicting this sort of modern anxiety issue affects young girls more than it affects young boys, and all of the research that I've seen so far seems to bear that out. I saw something else floating around today, sort of in response to that points out that the suicide rate for males is 4 times higher than it is for females, and it's something that the piece was sort of making the point, not in an obnoxious men's rights activist sort of way, but just sort of making the point, like, how often do you hear that discussed at all
Right.
in the media? And they point to a CDC site on suicide that makes no mention of the fact, like it talks about all of the disproportionate impacts that suicide has on different minority groups and LGBTQ and people of color and all the rest, but it fails to mention the fact that if you're a male person, you are 4 times more likely to end up committing suicide
Like
than
successfully,
a female.
It is a distinction. I always was aware that there is a gap between men and women, especially the young men.
I think
and
it was successful. I'll make sure there's a link in the show note. I don't have it pulled up right now, but I think it's successfully. I mean, that's not how you're supposed to phrase that. I don't think.
But there are attempts. So, you know, there are attempts. And what I read years ago, I don't know if it's still the case, men use much more effective means of killing, you know, like a gun to the head, you're likely going
Right.
to die, versus like some pill, you know, you don't do the dosage right, you just get a tummy ache. I don't know anything about suicide, but like from what I read, they take other approaches to killing themselves, which is not as effective as what the men do.
Right. I mean, it's to an extent interesting who is a worthy victim and
Right.
who is not, right? Because that's all the framing of this sort of stuff is. 90% of all murders are committed by men. Also,
Yeah.
in excess of 80% of murder victims are men.
Right.
But the thing that we hear, we don't hear that statistic ever, but we constantly hear that women are wildly disproportionately more likely to be killed by a family member or their husband or their boyfriend than anybody else. It's like, well, yeah, because 90% of murderers are fucking men, right? And granted, they kill a lot of women and it's bad, but 80% of murder victims are also men, and it's just not the sort of statistic that comes up in polite conversation a lot of the time. Anyway, I guess that'll do it for tonight. You've been listening to Cast Iron Brains, a podcast with Bob and Abe. Find the show on brainiron.com is the best way to get us. You can also find the blog there. We are also on Facebook or Twitter. If you would like to share anything that I have written or we say on this show, Abe occasionally even writes for the website, though not recently, I must say.
I will write at least once this year.
Good. Abe, did you... and the opening and closing themes of the show were composed by Mark Gillig. Abe, did you make it to the movies this week?
I did. I went to go see Scream 6. We're up to 6 with the Scream.
Impressive. Now so this is Scream 6, but it's like Scream 2 in this run of Screams, isn't that right?
Yeah, because I think the last 2 have been, you know, the same story. It's like a different cast. I mean, Nev Campbell... was in Scream 5. Apparently, there was some sort of
Okay.
negotiation that didn't go well because she's not in Scream 6, and the movie did very well. Like, word of mouth was strong. The opening weekend numbers were strong. Everything looks good, and now, Nev Campbell, in the story, they were just like, oh, she's worried about getting stabbed, so she took her family, up in New England somewhere. So
Right.
kind of gave like two sentences and just moved on with the stabbing. But the movie
Was the movie any
the
good?
movie was a lot of fun. It's silly fun. This is not going to make it to next year's Oscars. It's not that kind of movie.
Right.
It's not striving to be. But as a theater movie, it does a pretty good job. And it seems like it's kind of shifted to the new generation. Like the first Screams were around when we're youths. And now most of the people in the audience are like, 20, 15, 20, 25-year-old kids.
Right. So these movies are not aiming for, in the same way that the Creed movies were an attempt to capture the new generation rather than to be
Right.
just a nostalgia trip for us and our parents or what have you. These new Scream movies are for the kids.
It's for
more
the
than
kids,
they
but it's
are
also
for us.
the older audience because, they bring back Courtney Cox's character. Like, Dewey is, dead for those who are keeping track of the characters dying
Right.
from this movie. But I will say one thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of the stabbings, so there's a lot of stabs in this. But the plot armor that some of this new ensemble cast, like the Jenny Ortega's the only name that I know of the bunch, right?
Yeah.
But she didn't get stabbed. But, like, the other people that are in her crew get stabbed so often and so violently. And then, like, 20 minutes later, somebody's stretching them out. And they have the thumbs up saying, look at that, still hanging around. Don't mind me, I'll be in Scream 7. Like, it's like, come on. Have some respect for the stab. Like, if you get stabbed a couple of times, that's one thing. But there was a scene where this woman, this young woman, she not only gets stabbed, but this, the clown, the masked guy, he...
Ghostface,
Yeah,
yes.
Ghostface. He carves her up. Like, he moves the knife up.
Yeah, the full like gut move
and
that
she's
they
still
do.
like, oh
Yeah.
boy, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Is it? How are you still alive? Like, you should be dead.
Meanwhile, I watch All Quiet on the Western Front, and a dude takes like a 22 to the liver, and he's just done.
Yeah, see, that's
It's
clean.
fucking not right.
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah.
But setting that aside, it was just a fun watch. People were reacting to all the scare jumps and whatever. It was an entertaining enough movie. A silly movie. It doesn't make sense, the story, but like, it's fun.
All right. Well, we watched, as I said, I watched all of those Oscar movies. I got to 8 out of the 10 of them altogether. I look forward to seeing Tar and the Fabelmans at some point. What did you think of the Last of Us finale? Did you watch that today?
Yeah, I watched it. I knew in advance that it was going to be a 40-some-odd minute episode, which I thought was weird. The main takeaway was this Joel guy overreacted way too much. Like, what is this? Like, you're going to just mow down everybody, especially the doctor? What if you need their assistance in the near future? That's a pretty ridiculous action to take. Maybe it follows the video game or what, but that didn't make sense to me. I mean, I understand, she didn't have a say in the matter. You're just going to kill her, right? And if you're going to do that, by the way, if you're Marlene or whomever, or the other person, the Firefly lady,
Right.
kill Joel too. Once you knock him out, just why did it need to come to so you can think him? Like, he's a hothead. Like, he's got a reputation.
Right.
Just kill him. If you're going to kill the
That
girl.
was a profoundly stupid decision on her part. If she actually, I mean, she's already willing to go through with killing this girl that she helped raise to 16 years old or whatever, who was a friend's infant that she needed to save many years ago. Obviously, she should have either killed Joel or just kept him locked up, tied to a wall until the deed was done,
even then,
and then deal with him after.
He would still try to go on a rampage. How could you? We lost another daughter. Like,
yeah, he probably would have attempted some sort of retribution after the fact, but like, you certainly don't just like, okay, you crazed murder maniac, who I know is a crazed murder maniac who just survived a trip across the country, which would have required much more crazed murdering.
Right.
I'm certain of it. I'm just going to send you down the stairs with a couple of guys and hope for the best.
Guys
like,
who have
what
no
are you
respect
doing,
for him,
you
like,
idiot?
they're not respecting the threat he poses. They're just like,
Right.
move a little faster.
I also hated the video game bullshit logic nonsense of like, yes, and all along we knew we were going to have to do lethal brain surgery on her, and so that's the only way that we can develop any sort of vaccine. Like, that's just bullshit video game plotting that I don't care for whatsoever. And the fact that they just drop it on you in 30 seconds makes it even dumber.
Did they explain? So the mother didn't have the immunity, but the kid.
So it seems like she gets cut in the. By the way, not a lot of women in the writers' room, I'm guessing, because I've witnessed humans do the birthing process a few times. My wife, spectacular at doing that in terms of just a true professional getting the job done. But you know what? I don't care if you're distracted and killing a mushroom zombie. You know when the human comes out of the hole in your body where there had been no human forced through before, that was not believable.
Counterpoint, I have no experience with childbirth in any way. But, you know, a very excitable situation, right? So she was distracted, right? And also, isn't there a show like on TLC or whatever, like where did this baby come from? Where like the woman is like of a size to where she doesn't know she's pregnant for like 8
those
months?
are people who are deeply uninvested in the physical goings-on of their own body, right? Those are self-deluding weirdos. This was not a person who was a self-deluding weirdo. She was aware she was pregnant and in labor and in big trouble. There's no way that baby just
even the
slips out.
adrenaline of the stupid fucking zombie trying to kill me?
Absolutely not. Anyway,
by the way, HBO.
I think the idea there is that she gets bit or scratched or whatever in the struggle and becomes infected, and then a little bit of the cordyceps gets into the bloodstream through the umbilical cord, but only a tiny little bit. So it's enough for infant Ellie to fight off or otherwise sort of take in this infection without letting it kill her.
And then all the other infections thinks it's already infected. She's already infected and there's no damage. It's like this weird...
I guess. I don't really buy that explanation there because she is continually attacked no matter what.
Yeah,
so
that part didn't track.
I don't know what the idea is there, but whatever. And then to have Joel then just go into rampage mode and be just an absolute assassin and have all of the sort of video game, you're talking about plot armor earlier, like having the absolute armor of, like he took the invincibility juice or whatever for those 3.5 minutes, and I didn't care for that either, considering this movie had much more realistic violence, or this show had much more realistic violence through the rest of the season. And then throw in the fact that he tells her a lie at the end, which I don't think is a necessary lie. I think that he could have told her the truth here, which is that they were going to kill you and not give you the choice. And there's a hanging piece of dialogue there that I guess maybe they're trying not to bash you over the head with it. But when Marlene says, if given the option, she would have chosen this and you know it, he should have said, then why didn't you ask her? Right? Because the obvious answer there is that there's not any guarantee that she would have chosen. And in the same way that the trolley problem, the only moral way to solve the trolley problem is to put the track switcher in the hands of the people whose lives are at stake, right? That's the only true moral out to the trolley problem, is to let the person who is sacrificing themselves make that decision to sacrifice themselves. They needed to put that decision in her hands in order for her to make the correct moral choice for her, and nothing that Joel does or Marlene does in that situation can really be justified. Joel's more so because he is righting the wrong of taking that choice away from her.
It sounds like the next season is going to be based off of this, however well-intentioned Joel thinks he was being with the lie, but at some point, Ellie's going to come to realize that it wasn't the truth. She may already believe that to be the case.
She already knows that that's not the truth.
Because the story didn't make any sense. And you're right. I mean, I guess there would be no story if everything was handled in the right way. But I will say, this is 20 years into this fucking shitscape of a world, right, where there's no known cure. If there's a chance, just kill the kid. Like, what are we talking about here? People die all the time. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure next season it's going to be a lot of these weirdos around trying to bite you. This could have been solved with the death of just one person. Easy does it. Press the button and kill Joel while you're at it.
Speaking of being 20 years in, if you were 20 years into an apocalypse and no maintenance had been done on an elevator for 20 years, would you get on an elevator and expect to not die on the way down? Because I wouldn't. I get on these elevators and I look at the inspection sticker and it's like, last inspection was 3 months ago. Next inspection is due 3 months from now. It's like, wow, they're pretty serious about the upkeep on these fucking things. Twice a year they have to get these things inspected. 20 years later, I'm not getting on that fucking elevator. You out of your goddamn mind?
You know, I think it was John Mulaney. He had a joke where he said, like, when he was young, he thought like there were a lot of like sand dunes or where people just kind of fall into these sand pits, right? And
quicksand, yeah.
Quicksand, sorry. There you go.
Hey, quicksand featured prominently in all of our imaginations in the 80s, yeah.
Similarly, I was, when I was younger, more concerned about elevators, the functioning of elevators. I never think twice about elevators. Like, you know, I probably would have just been like 20 years in, like, it's fucking elevator, the buttons work. I'll just get on it because, like, I don't hear any stories about things going wrong with elevators anymore. When's the last time you heard about tragedy from an elevator?
All right, so that ends our recaps of HBO on Sunday nights. I don't know what's to come for what's the next HBO Prestige.
The last season of Succession, although there's a 1 week gap, so it starts in a couple Sundays.
Are we only 2 weeks away from Succession? Jesus Christ!
Yeah, March 26th or something like that. But like, I don't know I don't know if there's like a document or some sort of thing. I don't know what's going on in a Sunday night slot this upcoming week.
I don't know. I didn't watch Station 11 when that aired last year, and that's another one of these like post-apocalyptic thrillers. Maybe I'll watch that. That's still on HBO Max, I think. I
am like 6 episodes into that. The one problem I have with that, and the reason why I never actually watched, maybe I'll get around to it, Atlanta, like the FX show in Atlanta with. I don't like when shows or they have like too many standalone episodes where it's like there's no real connection. It's just like whatever. And Station 11, there is a very tenuous connection between episodes, but there's like episodes 1, 4, and 6 are like amazing, and then the others are just a drag to get through.
That's
and
fine.
Whenever
So
there's
you need the connective tissue between episodes. So
if it's a show,
you're not going to watch like
that
Poker Face, which is like a Monster of the Week kind of show. Not going to watch that.
It didn't have to be exactly that, but at least there's got to be some connection. You can't just be like, now I'm just doing drugs in Europe or whatever. Like, what the fuck? Why are you there? You were here the other day.
I never watched the Atlanta. I always meant to. Lori, it's one of Lori's favorite shows.
But people say great things about it, right?
Anyway, you got anything else for us tonight, Abe?
Nope.
Well, I guess that's all we've got for tonight, then. We will talk to you next time.
Later. Another short episode. Right on the button.
It would have been if Lori hadn't taken off there. I was practically wrapping it up there before she decided
She said it would do like 30, 40 more minutes.
I found the bank stuff all very fascinating.
But yeah, what's strange is like despite all of the different things that you may impose, it really does come down to humans behaving like humans do, and I don't know what you could do about that.
Yeah, there's literally nothing that if you're going to have a fractional reserve banking system, if we're going to accept that is what we want, where you only keep a small percentage of deposits on hand at all times, then you will just always be at risk of lack of confidence in the banking system, just ruining everything.
Right.
And it's this. I wonder if this doesn't become a sort of canary in the coal mine, given the fact that we've now seen over the last 3 years, or less than that, really. You watched what happened with these meme stocks, with what happened with GameStop and AMC and Volkswagen, and then also what happens with these fucking coins, where just by getting enough people talking about a coin on Twitter, you can suddenly increase the value by 10,000% overnight or something like that. Yeah. Like the power that these people had to cause a bank run in their fucking WhatsApp chats, and then to turn around and use their social media platforms to hold hostage the rest of the entire banking system, unless the federal government came in and said we're going to make you whole. Like that,
Right.
we're in like brand new fucking weird territory now.
If you can game that, although I will say, I mean, you've read up more on this than I have. What is the upside? Because I don't think anyone's coming out better. Like, right? I mean, at best, it'll just be where they were, right? But there's no one benefiting from this.
Right, but the benefit is that you remove all risk from the situation. You know, if you no longer have risk, then what is the fundamental concern?
That's true in a regular context, but if you're egging on this, right? If you were like, let's get in a WhatsApp group or like whatever is on Twitter, just to kind of agitate and cause this to happen, right? Let's say if you're just being a dick, there's no actual opportunity to make money unless I'm missing something. You know, if you got ahead of it and you bought, I don't know.
Right, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a way to make money. What I'm saying is that it is a way to completely eliminate risk from the calculation. Right. And if you've eliminated, if there's no downside, if you've completely I mean, again, like, and it's weird because it speaks right into Elizabeth Warren's wheelhouse, right? Because we 100% socialized the risk and 100%
privatized the profits.
That's a terrible system. It is the worst of all possible systems.
That's true. The only problem is that even though that is true, I just don't know how you can actually just say let it whatever happens. Like basically just kind of hands off, and if things get worse, then at some point you'll have to take some sort of intervention, right? So better get ahead of it and then try to develop some sort of strategy to prevent this from happening again. But just kind of saying like, hey, you have to absorb the cost, and then you have this ripple effect.
Right. Well, what did Bernanke and the rest of them say after 2008? That the biggest danger, the only real moral hazard that we face coming out of this is forgetting. Right. That's what they said. Is that the real problem is that the only real risk here is that we come out of this not having changed or learned anything, and then this is the situation that we're in. That we have a massive bank failure, and we just come in and we're like, nope, we're just going to pretend that nothing fucking happened here to make sure that nobody gets hurt. And that is exactly what he was warning against 10 years ago. Anyway.
They should have anticipated the answer to that question. You know, like, we will forget. Basically, when things get easier, people just forget. I don't know if anyone's followed up with the baby formula thing, right? Maybe the same problems persist, but like it's off the news and it's like
they 100% definitely still do exist. You're right about that. Anyway, all right. Good night.